On Wednesday, we saw the Kansas City Chiefs part ways with wide receiver Justin Ross at the request of wide receiver Justin Ross. And yesterday, I made a video about that subject. This morning, I covered what would happen if, due to Justin Ross no longer being a Kansas City Chief and Rashee Rice facing likely suspension, the Kansas City Chiefs decided to use their open spot on the 90-man, currently 89 out of 90 possible players under contract. What if they decided to use that spot to sign a wide receiver? A wide receiver mostly who would move the needle. Obviously, there are guys out there about which I would know nothing about. And what if they decided to use the $20 million that they currently have listed as cap space by Spotrac? What if they decided to use that money on a wide receiver to move the needle, maybe get a little closer to the Super Bowl for a fourth consecutive season? Well, now I want to ask the question, what if they decide to use that 90th spot on the roster to sign a player for a different position, but still one that is more likely than not to make the team and one that could move the needle? We're going to start with the offensive line because I think that is a position that the Chiefs might want to actually up the stakes for the guys on the roster. There are questions at left guard, right? There are questions at right tackle, I think. And I think that the Chiefs have a ton of guys that are NFL talents on the roster right now. But if you raise the floor, it always does better for depth, right? It's obviously, but what can you do for the lower guys on the roster by signing a player who is better at football than are they through training camp by motivating them and getting the best out of them, etc.? Well, Jedric Wills is an offensive tackle formerly out of Alabama. He is 26 years old, 6'4", 312 pounds, 10-inch hands, 34 and a quarter inch arms. Did a 34 and a half inch vertical jump, had a 9'5" broad jump. Those are good numbers. 5.05 40-yard dash. Decent numbers around here. Explosion grade is seen as elite there. You see that. But he is a former first-round pick, so up Brett Veach's alley, 10th overall to the Cleveland Browns in 2020. He played for the Browns 2020 through 2024. And this is what you're looking at as far as the amount of play he got. 960 snaps as a rookie, 763 in his sophomore campaign, 1,154 in his third season in the league. 2023 saw him play 569 snaps, and then he played 245 just last season in 5 games, starting 4. So he is a guy that might be a little bit of a reclamation project, but you're looking at a guy, again, that is the same age as Trey Smith. Maybe things just have not worked out to this point for Jedric Wills to the extent that you would hope or that he would hope. Now, he's got the Jawan Taylor-itis here, 7 penalties there, but a guy who has a overall grade of 52.9, pass blocking grade of 63.6, run blocking grade of 51.6. Here's the question I have with him. He's listed as a tackle, played left tackle first 3 years in the league, and then is listed a listed tackle, offensive tackle, the last 2 seasons. Is this a guy who could come in and play offensive guard? Would he be willing to do that? Well, he's unemployed in the middle of July. Maybe he's waiting things out, but I think probably if you put the right amount of money in front of him and you said, hey, we're going to give you the Becton treatment here and see if you can play offensive guard, maybe he would take it. I think that he has an interesting athletic and size blend for offensive guard. Perhaps a little bit short, perhaps a little bit light for the offensive tackle position. For an offensive guard, 34 and a quarter inch arms is a really good number. For offensive tackle, it's a good number, right? So That is Jedric Wills. I think someone that could come in and add competition at the guard spot, but you're probably going to end up losing one of the lower end guys on your roster that would probably make the practice squad otherwise. Then we have Deontay Smith or Deontay Smith. I'm not sure exactly with the apostrophe. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it. An RAS score of just 6.17. Remember, if we go up here to Jedric Wills, an 8.42 RAS score overall. But, he didn't do the 3-cone drill, so gets knocked a little bit on that. Would get knocked a little bit on that likely if he had participated. Deontay Smith, a 6.1 overall score, 6'5", 305 pounds, 24 reps on the bench press, 35 and a quarter inch arms. A 40-yard dash of 5.33, that's not a good number. A 10-yard split of 1.83 is an acceptable number. 29-inch vertical leap, 9'5" broad jump is a good number. Then you have his cone drills, and he did mostly all right there. I mean, for a big guy, you're looking at a guy who is 27 years old, comes out of East Carolina, was a 4th-round draft pick, played for the Bengals 2021 through 2024, but not a whole lot of action. Only had 50 snaps in 2021, 6 snaps in 2022, and 2 and 3 special teams snaps, respectively. So not a whole lot going on the field for Smith, but he is someone who has some intriguing measurables there. Again, can you convince him to play offensive guard? Can you bring him in and say, hey, you're not a tackle anymore. We're going to put you on the inside and see if you can compete. Then we'll move to the defensive side of the ball with Preston Smith, an edge player, 6'4" and 7/10, basically 6'5", 271 pounds, 10.625 inch hands, 34-inch arms, 24 reps on the bench press. He had a 4.74 40-yard dash and a 1.6 10-yard split. That 1.6, very, very good there. And we'll get into the stats in a little bit that kind of show that off. But a 34-inch vertical, 10-foot 1-inch broad jump. You're looking at a 4.28 short shuttle, which is a great number. A 3-cone drill of 7.07. It scores an 8.4 there. This is what makes me think if there is a spot, if Preston Smith is willing to play for a decent amount of money, Brett Veach might like to have him on the roster. Brett Veach seems, again, he's never told me, but he seems to emphasize the cone drills with edge players. Do you have that bend? Can you turn that corner? Asking those questions, and scores of 8.35 and 8.4 out of 10 on those numbers was a really, really neat trick for Preston Smith. Again, an RAS of 9.8 overall. He is 32 years old, so those numbers might not still apply. But 6'5", 265 pounds listed now, out of Mississippi State, 2015 second-round pick, 38th overall for the Redskins. The Packers afterwards and the Steelers in 2024. But look at these statistics here. You're looking at a guy that last season had 4.5 sacks at 32 years old. The season before had 8 sacks at 31, 8.5 at 39 at 29 years old. So you're looking at a guy who can be disruptive out there. Averages 46 tackles per season, averages 7.5 tackles for loss, averages 16.4 quarterback hits. Now, a lot of that took a big dip last season, but he only started 9 of the 17 games in which he appeared, so you're going to see a statistical drop-off there, but I think that he did respectable for where he was in the pecking order there. So I think that this would be a good signing should the Chiefs go out and make that. Looking to get, so the Chiefs last season went to the Super Bowl, yes, but they did not win the Super Bowl the way that they had the prior 2 seasons, and perhaps Second most notably among the deficiencies that the Chiefs had last season versus their 2 Super Bowl seasons is the fact that the Chiefs were top 5 in the NFL in 2022 and 2023 in sacks, but they were middle of the pack-ish in 2024, leading to the defense not being quite as impactful on games as previously they had been. So signing an edge player to get after the quarterback like Preston Smith might do the Chiefs some good. You want to talk about old edge players? What about Jedric Smith? Came out in 2015, had an overall RAS of 3.73. So sometimes these numbers don't mean diddly squat. You're looking at a guy who was 6'4", 274 pounds with 23 bench press reps coming out, a 29-inch vertical, and a 9'5" broad jump. You're looking at a guy who had a 4.83 40-yard dash and a 1.74 10-yard split. A guy who had a 4.66 short shuttle and a 7.42 three-cone drill. Bad numbers all around. He is, again, 32 years old, currently listed at 6'4", 270 pounds. He comes out of Kentucky, and he was a 4th-round pick, 122nd overall for the Baltimore Ravens, then played for the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and the Cleveland Browns and Detroit Lions last season. But you're looking at a guy who is still able to do some stuff. 5 sacks last year for the Browns, 4 sacks after finding himself on the Detroit Lions. So 9 sacks last year in his age 32 season. Before that, 5.5 sacks. Before that, 10 sacks. Before that, he played in just 1 game, finding himself with 0 sacks, but he did get a tackle on that season, so not a complete blank. And then you have 12.5 sacks, 13.5 sacks before that. You're looking at a guy who does still have it. I think that this is a player, should the Chiefs find themselves with enough cash to rub together and shove in his face, Jedric Smith would make an impact for the Kansas City Chiefs. Then we have James Smith-Williams, a little bit more of a projection, a little bit more of a guy that would be bottom of the roster type. Can you flip him into something useful for you? 6'3.5", 265 pounds, 33 3/4 inch arms, 9 1/4 inch hands. Had 28 bench press reps, a 9.07 overall RAS score, which included a 32-inch vertical leap, a 10'3" broad jump, a short shuttle of 4.52, and a 3-cone drill of 7.35. Those are the broad jump there, obviously, you see with a score of 9.29 is a good number. The rest are just kind of barely passing numbers. But then you get onto the speed side of things. He had a 4.6 flat 40-yard dash, which is a score of 9.7. A 4.6 flat 40-yard dash at 265 pounds is an absolutely terrifying human being. A 1.62 10-yard split with a 9.09 grade there. He is 27 years old, currently listed at 6'4", 265 pounds. He was a 7th-round pick, 229th overall for the Washington football team, before finding himself last season as a member of the Atlanta Falcons. He does not do a whole lot on the football field. You see him with 1 sack last season, a sack the season prior, then 3 sacks in 2022, 2.5 in 2021, and half a sack last year. The jump to 3 sacks was because he played 14 games and started all 14 of them. So he was depended on by that defense in Washington, but still only turned out 3 sacks and 23 tackles. Playing less, getting fewer starts, playing in fewer games, he got basically the same amount of tackles in 2023 and 2024. Basically the same amount of solos and assists both seasons. So you have a player that's fairly consistent here. Do you trust your coaching staff to bring him in at 6'4", 265, kind of your prototypical Spags defensive end? Do you trust your coaches to bring him in and make something a little bit more out of him? Then let's move to defensive tackles because, well, maybe D tackle 2 was one of the biggest needs heading into the draft, and now D tackle 3 might be a need as well, right? We don't really know what the depth is going to look like at the defensive tackle position. What about Raekwon Davis, formerly of Alabama, a 6.0 RAS score? He's 6'6", 311 pounds, 33 and 7/8 inch arms, and 11-inch hand. Put up 24 bench press reps with those 33 and 7/8 inch arms. Now, outside of that, you're not looking at a great athlete. 28-inch vert. You have a 9'3" broad jump, a short shuttle of 4.86, three-cone drill of 7.95, a 40-yard dash of 5.12 with a 10-yard split of 1.78 there. But he's another guy who is 27 years old. He's listed at 6'7". You see, that's not the case. But I do believe that after coming into the league at 311 pounds, he probably does find himself closer to 325 now. So 6'6", 325, that is a large human being. Again, out of Alabama, he was a second-round pick, 56th overall by the Dolphins in 2020. Played for the Colts last season. Not a whole lot of production. 0 starts last season for the first time in his career, but he did appear in all 17 games. You're looking at a guy who you're hoping can come in and just make a pile, a guy who can come in and get his hands in the air. Again, if you find yourself 6'6", with 33, basically 34-inch arms and 11-inch hands, you can block some passing lanes. Get him next to Chris Jones, another supersized defensive tackle, and it could mean problems for an offense. Then we're looking at Khil Davis. You might remember him if you were a Mizzou fan for the fact that you don't remember him because he did not go to Missouri, despite the fact that he is from Blue Springs, Missouri. There was a great hullabaloo about his commitment in college. But 6'1", 308 pounds coming into the league, a 9.57 RAS score is absolutely fantastic, but it's why I hate RAS scores. Because you don't have a vert, you don't have a broad jump, you don't have a short shuttle, you don't have a three-cone drill, you have no explosive or agility drills. You just have the speed and the bench press, and you're going to go ahead and give him a 9.57 anyway. That is an incomplete score. I would accept 9.57I to denote incomplete. That way I have to check if I'm just looking at RAS scores total. But anyway, off of my high horse. He does only have 31.5-inch arms, but he did get 32 reps on the bench press. He did run a 4.75 40-yard dash at 308 pounds and a 1.66 10-yard split. Both of those over the 9 RAS mark. The 4.75 40-yard dash is a 9.94 RAS, 9.94 out of 10. Again, out of Blue Springs, Missouri. He's 28 years old, entered the NFL as a 6th-round pick, 194th overall for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he played 2020 and 2021, spent 2021 with 3 teams, the Buccaneers, the Colts, and the Steelers, before finding his way back to the Buccaneers in 2022, and also the Los Angeles Rams in 2022. Then he played for the Birmingham Stallions, not an NFL team in 2023, but also found himself on the Texans in 2023 and 2024, and then played for the 49ers in 2024 as well. He has a single season in the NFL where he played for 1 team. 2020, his rookie year, he played exclusively for the Buccaneers. After that, he played for at least 2 teams every season, including an extracurricular non-NFL team. Now, not a whole lot going on the stat sheet for Khil Davis, but he does have NFL experience. He has 3 total NFL tackles. Not a great number there, obviously. 46 total or 3 total sacks, in the NFL, 46 total tackles, 10 quarterback hits. So he does get in the quarterback's face a little bit more than he gets the sack, but still not a terribly productive player in the NFL. Yet, if you are looking at one of the weakest positions on the Chiefs roster, at least how we feel going into camp, I'm a big fan of Keziah Izzard. I think that the rotation at defensive tackle is going to be impacted by Charles Omenihu as well, right? Getting in there for some defensive tackle reps. So I think that the Chiefs are in a little bit better position than I know a lot of people think they are. But still, this is an area of need. But anyway, guys, that is a few names that the Chiefs might consider bringing in if they want to move the needle at least a little bit in a couple of different spots. Didn't talk about Stephon Gilmore, didn't talk about a couple of the cornerbacks that are out there, right, that are a little bit older. I don't see those being the move, but they could be. You never know. Get a guy in here, get him a ring, and get him out of the NFL. But that is what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about, so consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.